The psychic research conducted by the Nazi scientists may have been carried out after the publication of two groundbreaking books. The first one was Psychic Discoveries, The Iron Curtain Lifted, written by Sheila Ostrander and Lynn Schroeder. It was first published in 1971, and this book highlighted the large-scale psychic research being carried out in the Soviet Union during the Cold War. In 1978, two American writers published a book called The New Soviet Psychic Discoveries, a first-hand report on the startling breakthroughs in Russian parapsychology by Henry Grace and William Dick. These two books sent shockwaves through the American military and intelligence agencies. After these books were published, a number of different American military and intelligence agencies began to urgently fund different paranormal research programs, as they believed the Soviets were way ahead of the West's effort into developing new forms of psychic warfare. One psychic research program was carried out at the Stanford Research Institute, and this research program led to the development of a psychic spying program operated by the CIA and the NSA, known as Stargate. But it seems the Nazi scientists at Montauk were exploring the use of negative psychic energy and abilities. The Nazi scientists would then use a cocktail of psychoactive drugs and hypnotism to brainwash their test subjects into obeying their orders. The Nazi scientists could have been exploring the uses of Dor energy or deadly argon energy, where their test subjects would use their psychic abilities to injure or kill people at a long distance away. Peter Moon and Preston Nichols suggest the Nazi scientists had an interest in the work of the Austrian doctor who lived in America, called Wilhelm Reich, who put forward the existence of argon energy, which produced in all living things. Wilhelm Reich went on to have a dispute with the FBI and the Food and Drugs Administration (FDA), as Reich believed he could cure illnesses and diseases. He died in prison in 1957, and the FDA ordered the burning of his books, and the destruction of his equipment. The Nazi scientists may have also been aware of the existence of the Nazi Vril Society, who believed in the existence of a spiritual force known as Vril, and the Nazi scientists were exploring ways into boosting this spiritual or psychic force, to improve the psychic abilities of their test subjects. The Soviets used their psychics to try and influence the minds of American politicians during the Cold War, into making them confused and muddled, and this would have a great impact on how America would be governed, and they hoped it would cause America to implode and collapse. The process of influencing people at a distance is known as remote influencing. The Soviet psychics were also instructed to cause brain damage to American politicians, to affect their reasoning skills, and this caused a great deal of alarm within the U.S. intelligence community, as they had no defense against such psychic attacks. So the U.S. intelligence community urgently required solutions to these threats, and this is why the psychic experiments carried out at Montauk were so brutal. As the U.S. intelligence community demanded results as quickly as possible, and the Nazi scientists didn't care about the welfare of these psychic test subjects. According to the British writer Tim Raffat, the Soviets also conducted similar trials, but they soon discovered that by using psychics to injure or kill people, it would leave their psychics being totally burnt out. So they would need a continuous supply of new recruits, or fresh meat, to continue their horrific experiments. The psychics would burn out due to what occultists call the threefold rule, where if you try to inflict harm on someone, using their psychic abilities, the universe will inflict a threefold increase in damage to the psychic. So the Nazi scientists needed an endless supply of test subjects they could turn into powerful psychics. The Nazi scientists would instill fear and terror into the kids they had recruited for this program, as the Nazi scientists were terrified of the kids, who they feared may use their newly discovered psychic abilities against them. In the book Psychic Discoveries, The Iron Curtain Lifted, the book describes the work of a Russian psychiatrist Dr. Vladimir L. Raykov, who was head of the Laboratory for Hypnosis at the State Scientific and Research Center for Preventive Medicine in Moscow. Raykov used a number of volunteer students in an experiment to produce a group of talented artists such as the 15th-century Italian painter, Raphael. This psychiatrist used hypnotism to convince they were a particular well-known artist, and after a few weeks these students could paint pictures like a professional artists. Yet many of the students selected for this experiment, they wasn't very artistic. Raykov believed he could hypnotize people and they would function in a super wakeful state, which allowed the volunteers to access their deep artistic talents. This super wakefulness is similar to the awakening of the superconsciousness. We all have this ability, and accessing our superconsciousness we can become more intuitive, artistic, and psychic. This experiment carried out by Raykov demonstrates the power of the human mind, where under the influence of a hypnotic trance, a person can become a talented artist. The Nazi scientists at Montauk may have used similar methods, where the kids would be shown a video of a number of talented psychics, and under the influence of a hypnotic trance, the kids will be convinced they have similar psychic abilities. The Nazi scientists at Montauk could have been inspired by this book, and they drew up a program where they would use hypnotism to convince the kids. They were all talented psychics, who all have amazing psychic abilities. Moon and Nichols have suggested that Duncan Cameron and another survivor called Stuart Swerdlow were the two main programmers in this project, and this deeply troubles them, as the training program developed by the Nazi scientist was quite harsh and brutal. The Nazi scientists may have based their brutal training regime on the Soviet psychic warfare program, where the Soviets put the success of the mission or operation above the welfare of the psychics. The psychic program developed by the Nazi scientists involved a combination of hypnotic sessions, where the kids are programmed to become suggestible to their instructions. Then they programmed them, so they become convinced they have amazing psychic abilities. The program may have included a special diet to detox their pineal glands, as this gland, which is also known as the third eye, which is the key to opening up our suppressed psychic abilities. While studying for this video, I believe the Nazi scientists who also worked for the Brookhaven National Labs, were using their positions within this lab, to receive classified intelligence reports and research papers, from the U.S. intelligence community. They could have received details of the Soviet psychic warfare operations, and they may have received information on a large number of American mind control programs such as the Pandora Project, and MK Ultra. The Nazi scientists then combined this information with their own research, which was a mixture of occultism, metaphysics, and physics. I can recall my own experiences I had with a criminal gang based in the UK, who had connections with the infamous Illuminati. My involvement occurred during the late 1970s and early 1980s when I was still just a kid. This gang carried out a series of experiments, which was led by a Cypriot doctor and hypnotist who would give us psychoactive drugs and he would hypnotize us. We would lie down on a bed and we were instructed to view or dream about the future. They discovered I was too old for these experiments, and they preferred younger children below the age of 10 years old. As their pineal gland hasn't calcified, and they found it easier to open up their third eye. I can also recall some occultism was involved in their experiments, as a woman told me about the use of ancient Egyptian beliefs were being used, as they state the old Egyptian symbol known as the Eye of Horus, was a symbol for the pineal gland, and this gland was key to unlocking our latent psychic abilities. During my time with this criminal gang in the late 1970s and early 1980s, I also witnessed or forced to take part in satanic rituals. I believe this was done, to install fear in us, so we would be too afraid to disobey them. I have a strong feeling they were using prayers and rituals from the Keys of Solomon or the Lesser Book of Solomon, which was written by the infamous Satanist Aleister Crowley. These books show how to summon demons, and it's claimed these prayers and rituals date back to the time of King Solomon. Peter Moon and Preston Nichols hint at the possible involvement of satanic rituals at Montauk, and they also hint that a number of occultists or Satanists were also involved in this secret psychic warfare program. Aleister Crowley believed that children process more psychic energy than adults, and Crowley also believed sacrificing children would also release large amounts of psychic energy. So the Nazi scientists at Montauk were carrying a series of psychic warfare experiments using children, and this unethical program was completely unsanctioned by the US authorities, and the intelligence agencies who knew about this secret program would have turned a blind eye to it, as it was producing successful results. Yet this program had a devastating effect on the kids they were using, and many of them, who survived this program probably, went on to suffer long-term mental disorders and illnesses. For the Nazi scientists, this was a bonus, as very few American courts wouldn't believe their testimonies, as the lawyers would claim the victims are not credible witnesses, as they suffer from serious mental disorders, so their claims cannot be taken seriously.